guy just like decided to make a right turn like 10 feet before the intersection and like put himself on the sidewalk.
Okay, here's our team class. And what we've done with the team class is that we took a list which we now know how to use from playing with it in the main program, and we buried the list inside the team class. Now along with it we put in a team name, so that now we have two variables that work together for this class, one of which happens to be a fairly complicated thing, a list. Okay. The fact that we've taken that list and marked it as being private means now the only way that you can get at it is by turning to the team class and asking it questions about the list. And having the team class turn around and ask the list questions and relay them back. And so an example of that is that if somebody wants to ask how many people are on the team, they have to call the size method for the team class. It in turn talks the list to get the actual size that the list is managing and sends that number back. Okay? So every piece of functionality that you ever wanted to do to talk to list is now buried where you can't see it, and it's going to require some sort of setters and getters in order to be able to do stuff with it. But now that means we get to control the list in this class. We can do things like decide what it means to remove people, what it means to add people. We could, for instance, go into add and check to make sure that they're not adding duplicates by putting an if statement in there, seeing if they're already on the list. If they're already on the list, we just move on to adding them again. Okay? So there's lots of reasons for being able to do this. In the simplest format, though, we're just saying, oh, okay, we'll take them with their word for now. If they say add this player onto the team, we'll just assume now that there's nobody else on the team and dump them directly onto the list. Okay. The yellow bulbs here, or the little warning signs, like this one, is not an error. People have been asking about that. It's just a warning that says, in this case, why did you bother making that variable if you obviously haven't used it anywhere? Okay, so the easiest thing to fix that would be to say, oh, it looks like we missed a getter. So we should really have a getter for get team name. And that will make the little yellow thingy go away, because now I actually have a use for that variable. I record it and then send it back. Okay? So in general, you can look at the yellow thingies and fix them if you want. Sooner or later, it's a good thing to do for cleanup, but you don't have to do it right away. Okay, if we look at what we've done in the driver for sample usage, we've decided that we can go along and we can get out the size of the team. I guess it's probably time to start writing some unit tests for this thing. So we'll click on the team class, and we'll go back in and we'll write a unit test, add the setup method, and we're specifically trying to test team to see if it works. Add the libraries. The normal thing that you want to test is to see whether or not the constructor works first, because that's about all we've got. So suppose we make a team. I'll just go steal one here. We can dump that thing into our test. There's our team. What things can you say about the team when you first make it? The name should be correct. So let's go dig out the name. We get the team name, and I think that the team name should be Canucks. I'm just going to steal Canucks from up there so I know it's exactly the same thing. Oops, almost steal it. Anything else you can say about the team at this point?
There shouldn't be anyone on it.
Should be what?
There shouldn't be anyone on it. shouldn't be anybody there. So the size is talk to my team and say, how many people have you got? I think that size should be exactly 0. Got it. Okay. So that tested to see if it worked. So basically we just converted what was in the main program, more or less the start of it, into a test. Okay. Let's write a test for adding a player. This time I'm going to write the test first. And I'm just going to try adding a single player to start with. So I can steal Canucks down here. And at the point where I start to copy and paste that thing, I start to think, if I'm going to have to copy and paste that team name in for every team, that's going to be a little bit annoying. So why don't I go back up and just make some test data for a team up here. So we'll make the variable there, and we'll use the setup method to remake the variable for each test, and then we don't need that, and we don't need to do that anymore, so we're making the tests a little shorter. So now I'm going to make a hockey player. So there's a hockey player. We can do my team dot add Fred. Now what do you expect to be true? Well, easiest one, if it doesn't have one person in it, then we don't care who it is, it's wrong. So the size had better be at least 1. Okay, so there's the easiest test. Now what?
Check the first player's name.
Go see if now we expect that Fred's going to be the only person on the list. How do we find Fred on the list given what we have in the team class? It's a trick question. Right now we've got no way of accessing the list because there's no function in there that gives us access to the things that are on the list. So let's do the simplest thing possible. Somebody can come along and ask and say, I want to get a hockey player off the list. And they can call get, and we'll have them give us a position of where they are on the list, so the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. And so in this case, we can send back whatever the list says is at that same position. So we'll just make use of the list get and return whatever it says. So now we have the ability to retrieve the number 0, 1, 2, 3 item off the list. So now in the test, we can go retrieve somebody. So now we have the ability to talk to the my team variable, and there's the get, and we can retrieve position 0. I think that who should be what? What value should I put there? Fred. Okay, so notice that somebody said, oh, you could go and you could retrieve him and you could check his name or check some feature about him. In this case, since I kept the Fred variable outside of the list and then added it, it means I can always go back and ask the question, is Fred actually on the list? Because I've got Fred's phone number or the reference to find him. If I made the add so that I put new hockey player something inside here, I would have no way of remembering what Fred originally was.
Is position defined somewhere, or is that constant?
The position in this case, we put in a 0. You can put in a 1, a 2, a 3. So
Is that a built-in
it's
function?
it's a function that's built into array list. And so what we're doing is we're just making use of array lists routine to do the work. Okay, so I think that that person had better be Fred. Run the thing and see, and our two constructors work, or our constructor plus adding a single player works. We can see if we can add 2 players, which is almost the same sort of test. So we'll change that to 2 players, and we'll make Fred. We'll make Sam. And now we think that the number of people on the list should be 2 instead. The first one on the list should still be Fred, and the next one on the list, if it's saving them properly, if I retrieve the number 1 position, should be Sam. Did I do the test correctly? Oh, didn't add Sam to the team. That would be helpful. So we'll add both Fred and Sam. Save it. Run it. So it's a good idea to make sure your test is correct before you go thinking that it's a bug in your code. And now I can add a couple of players at least. So I added 1, I added 2. That's probably close enough to know that add looks like it's working rather than, say, replacing. But always go add 3. Okay. So Daniel Sedin is on the team at this point in my driver. So let's just use the driver to test out some ideas. Suppose that Daniel Sedin scored a goal. I'd want to talk to the team manager and say, hey, Daniel scored a goal. I saw him score one. Go update your list someplace that has all of the values on it to reflect that he scored a goal. Okay? So this is going to be my team dot add goal. What are you going to give add goal in order to do its work? There's a couple of ways you could do it. You could do this, I suppose. Like that, to say, I just want to add 1 goal to that guy, because we talked about add goal, might as well just add 1. There's no reason for it to try to add 10. Because most of the time, most people only score 1 or 2 goals. Not a big deal to repeat add goal. Is there a better way of doing that? According to the way we did it for searching before? Instead of passing in this information, these 2 things belong together as information about a hockey player. So what we'll do is we'll make a new sample hockey player. And let me just steal this one. So there's the use of new again to make somebody who looks like Daniel. Sounds like an old song. And then now here what we can do is we've just condensed it down to basically go find a hockey player that looks like this one. Okay, so that's still that idea of using a, the 12-year-old here as the sample, handing them off to the team manager and saying, hey, do the work of going and finding them. So now if we move into the team class, we'll have to write something that does the same thing as public void add goal. And the thing that you're given now is the hockey player that's the sample or the looks like one. Now what? Got to search for him on the list. He's on the list someplace. We can now search this list. How do you search a list? Talk to the list, which is roster. What's the search for function called? Index of is search for. So it's basically the same code that we wrote outside of the list in the main program, now moved inside of the list. So you search for him, and what you get back is where he is on the list. What if he wasn't on the list? What value would you get? -1. -1. So let's just kick that one out, pretend they didn't ask us. If position for some reason is a -1, then we'll just pretend we didn't hear them. Really nothing to check. Must have mentioned the wrong team. So we kicked out any possible error. So now we found them. Now what? I've got an integer there coming back. It told me where they were on the list. Got to go ask the list again. Well, thanks for finding them, but now would you go bring them back to me? So now we've got to talk to the list again and say, please go get them. And now what you get back is that. And I'm just going to try to be a little more clear with the position variable by changing its name to found position. So now we've got the person we're supposed to update, so now what? That's the one that came from the list. Talk to it and say, oh, somebody got a goal. So that's look them up on the list, update the value that's on the list to whatever seems appropriate. Okay, and hopefully that should make our driver a little happier. So we now gave him a goal. Oops, what's wrong with my driver? Saved. How would we test to see whether or not add goal worked properly? Add a goal, go back and retrieve them, and see whether or not he's now got the updated value.
Would you check before and after? Unless you know the starting goal number.
Well, we can do that. Let's just steal this unit test and see if we can convert it. So it makes a couple of hockey players. So we'll call this add goal. we'll add Fred and Sam to the team. We don't need to worry about all of this stuff anymore. So now we'll do my team dot add goal for, let's do it for the second hockey player on the list, just to make life more difficult. So we added a goal to Sam. How do you retrieve Sam from the list? It's actually two ways of doing this. Since we kept the reference to Sam, the sneaky way is to just go back and ask Sam how many goals he has. Because we have his phone number directly, we don't actually have to go through the team manager, right? We saved it to start with. Then we asked the team manager to update him, to talk to Sam and get him to change, and so we can go look at Sam afterwards. So the easiest way to do it is to go in Sam goals is Sam dot get goals, and I think that Sam goals should be 1 instead of 0. Okay, that's sort of a shortcut. If I wanted to make a round trip, what I would do instead of that is I would go ask the team manager to refetch Sam for me, dig him out of the list, and then go look at what the team manager got from the list. But we're basically talking to the same Sam at this point anyway. So now we know that add goal works. Okay, so we can basically update any player we want, whether or not you use, you know, the add assist function looks almost exactly the same. The only thing that changes is that when you look them up, instead of calling add goal, you call add assist. Okay, so they're basically exactly the same code, so I'm not going to bother doing that one. Okay, let's see. If you're a somebody who's playing this game, after you've added a few goals to people that are on your team, what's a question that you're going to want to ask? It's the most important question in a hockey pool.
Who has those goals?
How many goals or how many points does my team have? So at some point, we should be able to calculate the team points, right? Instead of just, so do the total of all of the points for all of the hockey players. Where would you like to write that code? Got two choices. We could write it in main, or we could write it in team class. Either one will work. We could go in the main class, since we know the size of the number of players on the team. We know how to retrieve them, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. We could do the work here and go out and ask the list, you know, give me a team member, how many goals has he got, how many assists has he got, or what's the total points, let me do the work. Is there a better option? Yeah, push the work down, and it would be nice if all I did is ask the team manager instead. So I don't want to do any work. I'm just going to turn to whoever the team manager is, and I'm going to say get total points for the entire team. Okay, so we won't bother doing the work here. We'll go inside the team class, and we'll write some added value now for the team, public int get total points. Okay, how's the team manager going to retrieve total points for everybody on the team? Where are all the people stored? So it's going to have to take the roster and do what in English? Forget the Java, just in English.
Review retrieve the game keys and count?
How many, what's this, got this pile of things,
The first one.
well, forget about the first one. What would you say in English about being Java people? I give you this bunch of stuff here.
Count one and then look at the next.
Too much detail. You told a little 8-year-old there's this pile of stuff. I want you to do what with it?
Go through and sort it.
Count it? Move it from that place to that place?
Which, I mean, I'm trying to get you to use the words "go through all of them." Does that
Go
not
through
make-
all of them.
Go through all of them? That's all you're gonna do, is go through all of the players on the team and do something with them. So what's the phrase for go through all of them, the most convenient phrase in Java?
forEach.
So the forEach, so that's for every hockey player who in the roster go through and do something with them. What would you like to do?
Add their goals to a set variable.
Put the sum of their goals and assists.
Let me show you a different way of doing this. Instead of worrying about the loop, how would you do just one of them? Suppose that we have a hockey player. How would you talk to the, let's do it this way so we can get some help. Something, won't worry about that for a second. If we just wanted to get one player's points, so we'll talk to who's a hockey player, and we'll say what? Not get goals or assists, but conveniently it has get total points, so we're not going to bother with the details. So now we can get the points for one hockey player. If you wanted to get the points for all of the hockey players instead, what would you do? Now it's go through all of them. So that would now go through all of them and get the points for each of them. I run format here. And what would you do if you had the points for one of them? Add it to a total. I guess total needs to be defined outside the loop, since we'll need to use it outside of the loop. And then after we're done, return the total. Okay, one point about loops is that quite often the game to be played is to start with the stuff in here and try to think of how would I do one of them, and then if you can figure out how to do one of them, you can always wrap a loop around it and say, now I can do a bunch of them or all of them, because this thing just means do all of them. Okay? So if you're having trouble, you know, you get this thing and then you're blankly staring at that thing, erase the loop and go back and say, well, just let me try and do one. And somehow once I can do one, I'll get it to work for all. Okay? So there's hopefully total points. Well, how would you know if get total points worked? would a unit test look like for
It'll stop looping.
get total points?
When it's done looping, it'll just return total points.
For the test you're in, or a completely new test?
Completely new test. Let's move down here. I'll show you a little thing that's sometimes useful in tests. If you want to do the total points for one, you can actually use add goal as if it were a function. So it's possible to do this, which basically does all of the stuff that's in that function. And then afterwards, I think that my team dot get total points should be exactly 1. Okay, so that just reuses the stuff that was in add goal, and since my team is global, you can then turn around and query the result.
I'm a little lost. Which player did it just add that point to?
It added it to Sam, because this thing does all of that work first and then comes down and allows you to
From there. Yeah,
test
gotcha.
total
I thought
points.
the add goal was being called from like the hockey class from
Nope.
way back.
No, if you wanted to do points for a bunch, we could maybe do this. So we'll add something to a different hockey player. So we'll take the one that looks like Fred. We'll give him a goal. And then total points, since it's to 2 different hockey players, should now be 2. Still works. So there's add goal. Okay, so we can figure out total points. What's the next thing that somebody's going to want to see if they're just using this thing in the driver? You got your hockey team. Looks like your hockey team's got 20 odd points. What's the next question that comes to mind about your team? Who got the most points? So it would be nice if I could get a list of all of the players out in there with their point values so that I can see who's doing best at scoring in my hockey team. What facility would you like to use to go through all of them? What would be the simplest thing to use? A forEach would be the simplest thing, right? So if we could type for hockey player who, in this case my team, do something with it. And in this case, there's this nasty message that says, oh, forEach isn't going to allow you to do that. So let's just back up a second. Let's just leave that one there. Suppose that I said use a counted loop to do it instead. How would you do it with a counted loop?
You would go through the roster based on its size.
So I equals 0. I is less than my team.size. I plus plus. So basically a standard loop. And I've said counted loops always look the same. Retrieve the hockey player. In this case by position. Get the person at position I. So notice we have get and size already available to us, so we can retrieve them and we could print them out. I'll do who.get last name. Plus who.get total points. Okay, that would be one way of printing them all out. Using a counted loop, if I can get that in the right place. There are times when I despise Eclipse. There we go. Okay, so there's a counted loop that would print them out. And that works just because we've already provided the facility. What's the other loop style that's missing? We've got 3 different loop styles. The one that we just looked at the other day. The special fancy who's next one. It's that one that uses that thing called an iterator. So it follows a pattern that looks like this. You say, I want an iterator for hockey player only, and we'll call that thing the person who's fetching things, and we would say, oh, you need to go talk to my team and ask them to provide somebody who's going to fetch stuff for you. And this is going to have errors, but we'll just ignore them for a second. So it would look like that, and then it would be while gopher.hasNext hockey player who is talk to the gopher and say go fetch the next one for me, and then you would do basically the same thing. Okay, so those are your 3 options. The counted loop works because we've supplied get and size already in the team, but if you look at this one with the iterator, this one doesn't work because my team doesn't have that function built into it yet, but we know that's the one we need. Okay? Work for array list, but it doesn't work for there. And I also said that any time that you write one that looks like this, that thing, the compiler just turns around and writes that one for you. So the trick to getting forEach to work in the nice way is to be able to get that function into the team class. Okay, so somehow this thing that looks like that needs to be in the team class. So we'll just go into the team class and we'll see if we can add it. That's going to look like this. It's going to be an iterator only for hockey players. And the function name has got to be called Iterator. So it looks like that. So now here's the sneakiness. All throughout this thing we've been saying, if we don't have one, I guess the list probably has one that will do what we need. So why don't we just talk to the list, which is the roster, and ask him to supply us with one of those gopher people, and then we'll take that and we'll just send it back to whoever asks. So this is another one of these ones. We don't have to do the work ourselves. We just have to talk to the list and get it to send back the thing that we should have sent. And we'll just click on the bulb here and say, I want you to know do the import for that thing, and all of a sudden it makes that thing happy. And if we go back and look in the driver now, that one's fixed, because now we made that function available. Actually just sent up a level from the list. But the forEach still doesn't work. The forEach has still got an error. So we're back to the same error for here. And I said that if we can, there's some way of coercing the compiler to, when we say this, write that. We got that one to work. The only issue here is this silly message that says iterable at the end. And iterable there, that error message in all of its fineness is basically saying, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know any way that I can go to your class and get one of those gophers out of it, because you haven't put up the sign that said you can ask me for those people. Okay? So this is another one where what you have to do is, not only it's like comparable in this case, not only do you have to write the function like we did for compare2, but you also have to announce that it's available by going up to the top of this class and putting up the sign that says implements iterable for hockey players. Okay? And that's just the announcement that, hey, there's a facility available, this Iterator function, that will allow you to go fetch people who will go through the list for you. And now that that's available, in the driver, all the error messages have gone away, and so now we can turn around and we could just do the simplest form of printing, which is that one. And there's the 3 different techniques for doing the same thing now all available to us. Okay. Now, that was the long way through it. I'll give you the shortcut. The shortcut is really simple. The shortcut is, if you ever want to use a forEach on an object that you create, like the team class, chances are pretty good that you're keeping a list of things inside your class, which is the things that you want to run through. And so all that you have to do to make it work is make sure that you include a function that looks exactly like that, except change the name to student if you were keeping a list of student, fish if you were keeping a list of fish. Make sure that the class says implements iterable at the top for whatever the class name, whatever is stored on the list. So if you were storing fish, it would change the word to fish there. And if you do that, it's guaranteed that the forEach will magically work in the driver program. Okay? So there's the shortcut. Don't have to really understand it. Take the 2 lines to send the iterator out, take the implements iterable at the top, plug it into the top of the class that has the list in it, and then all of a sudden magically you have the forEach. And so the joy of the thing here is that in general we'd probably rather not supply a function to retrieve things by position. We'd probably avoid that and just give people the option of going through all of them to retrieve stuff. So at this point what you have, if you look at them, they're all going to basically run the same and hopefully print out all of the people on the list. I think I've only added Daniel Sedin on this list. Yeah, we'll add another one. So now there's 2 people, and it's going to print it out 3 times because I've got 3 different loops in there. But there's Sedin and Kessler with their total points so far. Now, one quick last question. What order do you want them to come out in?
Highest scores to lowest.
Top dog in the top.
You probably want most points to lowest point. How do you get them to sort? What's the function in Java that does that? Collections.sort, conveniently enough. Now, the trick question, where should collections.sort go? Where should we put it in the code? Should we put it in the driver? Should probably go in the team. Where would you like to put it in the team? Well, how you get it in there, the question isn't how you get it in there, the question is, where's a good place to put it first? There's actually two choices here. One of the places you could sort is after you've added somebody, or sorry, after you've added a goal. You know that after you've added a goal, things might have changed, people might be in a different order. So one of the sort of obvious places to put it is anytime somebody changes it by adding a goal, what you could do is you could go in here and you could say, oh, I've added the goal, now I'll sort my list. That's option number one. Is there another option of where to put it? Well, you never ever actually return everything except. Okay. The other option is the recognition that in the iterator, at this point, if somebody's saying, I want somebody who I'm going to use to go through all of them, that's the opportunity to turn around and sort instead. So instead of putting it in there, we can cut that out and we can actually put it in there. The real life analogy is, how do you keep your room when nobody's around to look at it? There's two choices. You can keep it totally messy and you can just keep throwing things into the room and not care, right? And then you can wait until somebody comes and asks, can I come and see what's in your room? And then you can sort it, which is what we're doing here. Okay? The other way, if you put it in the update method, that's more like saying, oh, every time I throw something into my room, I'm going to go into my room and I'm going to reorganize it and I'm going to make sure it's all nice and in order for whenever anybody looks. Either one works. In general, doing it every time is more work because you're constantly rearranging your room to try to fit things and keep things in order. This one has the advantage that you wait until somebody asks, I'm going to go through your room, and then you go, oh my God, let me put things in order, now you can go look. Okay?
Would you have to put back code to it, like almost every single function, because you'd have to do it when they ask you
Yeah. The nice thing about this one is you only have to put it in one place. Because what's going to happen here is not only are we going to have add goal, but we're going to have add assist. We're going to have remove player that removes people off the list. And so now what you'd have to do is every time the list changes in any function, you'd have to go through and make sure you did a sort. Okay? Whereas in this case, it doesn't matter how many times it changes, you just keep letting it change until somebody comes along and says, can I go look? And then you go, oh, wait a minute, sorted it, oh, there you go, now you can look. Okay? So in general, that one's preferable over the other one, unless you have some reason not to. Right? And so now we've got the list in order. What order is it in? Descending order. So we'll do a collections.reverse. The roster to put it back into a convenient order. And now we're guaranteed that it's always going to be sorted highest to lowest whenever everybody uses a forEach to run through it and have a look. And now we have a completely working team, and that should be enough to get you through all of the next lab. So tomorrow I'll go through the lab 2, write it on the board for you, show you how I would do it, how you can sort of efficiently get through it and write it in a small space of time.